Okay, alright.
Hello and welcome back to the Make Lemonade podcast, the show brought to you by Lemon Squeezy as we hope to inspire you to make money from your own lemonade stand. I'm one of your co-hosts, James, and although JR can't make it today, I'm here with a returning guest, Justin Jackson. Justin is the co-founder of Transistor.fm, a podcast hosting platform that hosts over 27,000 podcasts. Justin has bootstrapped the business since 2018 and has used it to build a better life for himself and his employees. Justin was on the pod back in January and we ended feeling like there was lots more we could cover, particularly Justin's thoughts on building a calm company and what he plans to do with his life and his money. Here's a clip on how Justin ended the previous episode.
I think that's a good way to actually end it because I am very passionate about Transistor because of what it's enabling. It's enabling me to do great work at work. It's enabling me to work with great people, serve amazing customers. And then the other part of our lives, which aren't work, it's enabled all this other stuff that frankly should be more exciting. Yeah. Family, friendships, community, living life, making memories, going on adventures. That's real life. And this little piece that people focus on in entrepreneurship is like actually it's significant, but only in the sense that it becomes the engine for your actual life. So right. I'm happy to come back anytime and talk about the good life.
So Justin, welcome back to the show. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm happy to be back. We serve over 27,000 podcasts, including right now the number one podcast in the US charts at least, but I think globally on Apple Podcasts, Acquired is over. It's before Joe Rogan. It's before Smartless. It's before Nightline. It's been number one for the past 4 or 5 days.
That is so cool. When did Acquired switch over to Transistor? Because they didn't start on Transistor, did they?
Yeah, they switched over. I think it's been at least 2 years now. Somebody in my network introduced us. They had already been interested in us. They liked our ethic of being bootstrapped and attention to detail and customer support. And they felt like they were kind of like an indie team. It's just the two of them, Ben and David. And yeah, they were looking for someone to work with. And yeah, it's been awesome to work with them. They've been and fun to see them ascend the charts. They were just featured in the Wall Street Journal, which drove an incredible amount of downloads. I was surprised because they've had press before in like Fortune, I think, and maybe The Verge. But the Wall Street Journal was like a massive amount of interest.
How does having such a big customer like that, it might not necessarily be financially,
yeah.
How does that impact Transistor as a business, what you build into the product, the pressure you have to make sure your analytics are right, to make sure everything's working?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's incredibly motivating for us. I was a fan of the show before they switched. I took their call thinking, I mean, I just want to meet these guys because I think what they're doing is incredible. They're amazing storytellers, just the dynamic between them, the research they do for every episode. The show is basically hardcore history, but for great companies. And yeah, I was just so impressed with them. And to have them as a customer is more motivating and exciting than anything. We're all fans. We want to build a better product for them and all of our customers, but their scale helps us to see things and opportunities that we might not with a smaller show. So I think the rest of our customers benefit quite a bit because we're able to introduce things that were inspired by Acquired, and then everybody gets those features.
Mm-hmm. They're quite a lean operation. You say there's only two of them, but are there any differences you can see with the scale of a podcast like this versus the scale of some of these smaller indie podcasts we see?
I mean, this is the funny thing about a digital economy is that the effort you put in is not always commensurate with the results you get.
Yeah.
There is some correlation. They do an incredible amount of research and they are very good at what they do. They are very focused on the product, and they're also very focused on giving advertisers what they call an 11-star experience. So they're really partnering with advertisers in a way that I've never seen anyone else do. And it's allowed them, and these numbers are public, it's allowed them to sell sponsorships for like a single season. Presenting sponsorship, I believe, is $750,000. And then I think the feature spots, there's 2 other spots that are $400,000 each. So they're like almost doing $2 million in a season just from 3 sponsors, which is pretty incredible. And it's attention to detail. It's making a good product. But for sure, there's people out there putting in just as much effort and not getting the same results. So it's like, at the end of the day, everybody's uploading an MP3, right? They're all uploading an MP3. And then it's what scale does that MP3 get to? How many people does that MP3 reach? What kind of people does that MP3 reach? That kind of dictates, the success you'll have. And it just happens that Acquired has the most valuable audience in the world, which is business executives, which advertisers like JP Morgan want to reach and are willing to spend a lot of money to reach. And they also have a scale, they're reaching hundreds of thousands of listeners every episode that most niche audiences don't get. So they've got both things kind of firing there. And, this is one of the reasons I've been thinking about this idea of the engine that runs your business. Mm-hmm. And just some businesses, I think, are more like that engine that's burning oil and is constantly overheating, and you're constantly having to bring it into the shop, and you're, having to do all this maintenance on it all the time just to keep it kind of chugging along. Whereas some engines, they don't require as much maintenance. They have incredible torque. They run really great. And I think maybe you and I could talk about this today, because I've been trying to work this metaphor out. But I think more business people should be paying attention to the engine that's running their business. And, is that engine getting them where they want to go? Or is it just like, man, I got to put oil in this thing every day? Is there a possibility that you could let that old engine go and go find something new that might serve you better?
For sure. We're 100% going to get onto this metaphor. And this is kind of all what this episode is going to be about. For those that are interested in Acquired and what it is, briefly explain, it's a long form podcast where these 2 guys do incredibly in-depth case studies on some of the biggest companies in the world. And 2 of my favorite episodes were 2 of the big luxury brands, LVMH and Hermes. And they're just super well researched, captivating stories, told perfectly, and a lot of people I know listen to it. Justin, where did you first come across this engine metaphor?
Yeah, I think it's been talking because I have this private community for bootstrappers, and then I have my email newsletter, and I'm tweeting about business all the time. And then I've gone through it myself, and I just noticed as people are asking me for advice, often the problem is their business has a bad engine, or an engine that's just kind of like limping along. So, I mean, you can go all the way back. I just did my personal business history on my YouTube channel. And, I started in high school doing raves, doing events. Now, an event business is very launch centric. It's like you pick a date, you book a venue, and then you got to sell tickets leading up to the event. And generally you want 30 to 50% of tickets pre-sold. And then you're hoping to get enough people going that their friends are going to come along with them and then fill up the venue. And, we did one event that was like sold out and amazing. And then we did a second event, and I think we got to maybe 30, 40% capacity.
Bad engine
In the sense that it could be a good engine, but it's a specific type of engine, right?
Got you.
And another example would be, once I entered the software business, one of my first kind of forays into, selling digital products was I sold a book and a course called Marketing for Developers. And initially, it was amazing. I launched it, and I think I did maybe 60 to 70 grand in that first year, on the side. And I was like, wow, what a fantastic engine, because you make it once and then you launch it, and then as many people show up to buy that thing, that's what you make. There's no duplication costs. There's no photocopying costs. There's no printing costs. Whoever shows up to buy Marketing for Developers, that is basically profit. But then I decided to quit my job and do that full time. And I realized that engine requires a constant launch cycle. And maybe I'll clarify to say the product I'd built, the audience I'd chosen, and maybe just the other dynamics at play meant that for me to continue to make revenue, I had to keep relaunching something new. I had to make an update and relaunch that. I had to write a different book and launch that. I had to write a different course. I had to add workshops and consulting and all this other stuff to maintain this business. And so that one for me, it felt like, sometimes my engine has ludicrous mode. It's like going super fast. And then it felt sometimes my battery's at 3% and I need to find a charger right away, or I'm going to, my car's going to be dead on the side of the road. I'm mixing electric car metaphors now. And, but yeah, it just felt like to keep that business running, I was just constantly like thrashing, like, okay, I got to do another launch. And I finished a launch and it was exhausting, and I'm doing all the things leading up to it. I'm having to post like interesting stuff on social media and on Hacker News, and I have to email my list all the time. And I started burning out my list because they got tired of hearing about launches. And I just felt like I'm always having to sell to people, and I've got to keep putting out this constant stream of free content in order to drive traffic to this paid thing. And it was difficult compared to one thing that changed my mind about this, or opened my eyes to just how powerful the market is and how it kind of informs how your engine's going to run, is meeting Adam Wathan. And he called me up because he wanted some advice on launching a course. He'd seen me launch Marketing for Developers. He was launching, I think, Refactoring to Collections, which is a course for programmers, specifically PHP developers. And, I was giving him advice. I gave him my same launch sequence. I gave him, he did everything almost exactly how I'd done it. And his results were just way, way different. I did 60 grand in a year, and I think he did 60 grand in the first, we'll say the first half of the day. Like it was just a much different dynamic at play. And when he looked at that engine, it kept going. The momentum kept going for a lot longer. So he didn't really need to put much more fuel in the tank. It was just constantly running. People kept showing up day after day to buy that product. And that has continued now with, he's the founder of Tailwind Labs, and they sell a UI kit called Tailwind UI. And it's a single purchase product, and people just keep showing up every day. There's so much demand that this engine is very healthy. They need to do things to keep driving it forward, but comparatively, somebody who's working on this broken engine that's eating oil, that's grinding gears, is doing way more work to keep that engine running than what Adam has to do today. And observing that made me think, man, like that's what I want for the next business I start. And that journey eventually led me to Transistor. And this is why people like SaaS businesses, is any sort of recurring revenue is such a great engine, because it's kind of like plugging in your electric car every night. So like one great thing about an electric car is if you have charging at home, you never need to go to the gas station. You're just driving it all day. You come home at night, you plug it in, you wake up in the morning, and you've got a full tank. And SaaS and recurring revenue can feel like that. It's just every month you get basically the same amount of money that you had last month. You can depend on that being there again this month. It's definitely a different financial engine, and when it's working, it gives you the engine to kind of power everything else. So all the things that indie entrepreneurs want: freedom, flexibility, calm work environment, calm company, and then a good life outside of work. To get all of that good stuff, the unfortunate reality is you need a strong financial engine. You can't just go out on your own, which is what I did when I was selling all these courses, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to go out on my own. I'm going to live this free life. But then to keep that engine running, I was having to work so hard. It just wasn't sustainable.
My question was going to be about the business model, where you were saying when you went out on your own selling books and courses, it was just a grind. Then I was like, but Justin, you now do SaaS and it's not. But then when you use the Adam Wathan example, that market becomes so much more relevant, the pull of that market.
That's right.
Now, you've spoken about back in the day, your skate and snowboard shop, which you started in your early 20s, and you can hear about that in the video you referenced on your YouTube channel. Now, this is a great example of business with a bad engine. Low margin, high complexity, high risk, long hours, low pay. How do you think you could do a skate shop with a good engine, Justin?
I mean, this is what's difficult is so much of it depends on the market. The market really does determine so much. And I'm not sure how we could work this into our metaphor, but I think it was just so clear when I compared my course business to Adam Wathan's course business. There's all sorts of factors that made Adam Wathan's so much better than mine. And a lot of it had to do with the market. So I was trying to teach software developers marketing. And if you look at all the soft developers in the world, let's say there's 5 million, what percentage of them want to know marketing? 5 to 10% maybe. So we've just cut it down quite a bit. What percentage of those people are ready to learn about that now? We cut it down even more. What percentage of those want to hear about it from someone like me? We cut it down even more. And that market just didn't have the same dynamics as PHP developers who wanted to learn about something that was kind of really a subject that was really hot at the moment, which was refactoring to collections. People had been talking about it. There's all this like pent up demand for it. And so when he released it, it was just like it just, he didn't have to push it. It was like the market was just eating it up. Where with my course, it was like, I had to really convince software developers why they needed to learn marketing, why I thought it was a good skill for them to learn, not just for their own product businesses, but at work, ways to level up in their day job. He had to do way less work.
For sure. Well, you've been writing about calm companies recently, and on our previous episode, we did end on this, building a profitable, purpose-led, freedom and flexibility for yourself and your employees, fun, mindful, sustainable growth, calm work environment. This sounds like such a great company, Justin. I want to be there. I want to run it. But in reality, is this possible to happen all the time with a company? Hey guys, it's Editing James just quickly here. Now, after we recorded this conversation, I messaged JR and see if he could send me some thoughts on some of the topics we were talking about. Here's what he had to say about calm companies.
Hey guys, sorry I couldn't make the recording. I wanted to answer some of these questions that I heard you guys talking about. So this one about the calm engine from Justin, I think is interesting. I've heard him talk about this before, and the way we think about lemon squeeze, I mean, we've done a lot of the same things, right? We haven't done the VC thing. We haven't done like growth over everything. I mean, yes, it's been harder because we can't pump the brakes on lemon squeezy growing, but we still want to maintain that like calm, profitable type thing. So I guess the way we've approached it is, like probably 6 months ago, we actually made a conscious choice just to focus on profitability and make sure that we didn't lose sight of that. I think there was a real moment where we could have just really taken off even more, which actually sounds crazy, and it's one of those things that keeps me up at night because I don't know if I made the right choice. I know that this idea of calm, and I get it, and it sounds amazing, but also I feel sometimes a responsibility to the way that Lemon Squeezy is designed as a business is like our success is tied to our customer success. And so I feel like we need to push a little harder to make sure that we're delivering on that promise. And so I don't know if I've like reached a point with my business where the responsibility on my shoulders requires us to let go a little bit of some of that calmness to make sure that we're holding up our end of the bar, the deal until, we get a team that's larger or, things calm down. I just feel like a responsibility. So I could get on here and say, oh yeah, we are profitable and we are doing what we want to do, but I feel like we have to do what's right. And I'm saying that genuinely. I'm not just saying like whatever the customer needs. I feel like we're very public and out in the open. And so, yeah, it's just like a reputation thing. And it's also just a conscious like responsibility thing that I feel like I have to do.
Okay. So that was JR's thoughts. Back to the conversation with Justin and if he thinks you can have a calm company all of the time.
Not all the time. No, that's the hard part is that you need to find a financial engine that works. Mm-hmm. You need to find an engine that's going to really drive everything else you want from the business. And if you want a calm company, then you need an engine that can at least produce enough margin. Like when I wrote that piece, I wrote that we need more calm companies piece on my blog. I heard from a lot of service providers, accountants and other things. And their question was, could I make this a calm company? Because it doesn't feel very calm. And part of it is that engine is tied to hours worked. As an accountant, it's like you only have 8 hours in a day. And during tax season, you're probably working 12 hours a day. And you're just having to grind through. I think it's possible with maybe processes and maybe AI to improve that engine. That engine's always going to have certain dynamics, though. And so if depending on what you want to accomplish and depending on everything else, your personal characteristics, your personal network, what you're good at, all of these things inform what you're able to do. And I know people who have started SaaS companies and they've been working on them for, 8 years and they're stuck at $1,000 MRR. That engine is not working very well. And you can't experience all of the good stuff that an indie company can provide, like Calm Company, unless you've got an engine that's working. And for John and I, that meant, we launched Transistor publicly August 1st, 2018. And by the following year, we were both full-time. Maybe we'd hit $30,000, $40,000 in MRR by the following year. So, that growth, that engine gave us kind of what we needed. And even then, that in retrospect, that happened pretty quickly. It's a year from launch to full time. But at the time, we were struggling. Like we were cranking that engine, just like, when's this thing going to start running? Because we were tired and getting burnt out, and there was definite difficulty working up to that point. But I think we learned enough by that point that if we had not gotten to 30, 40K in MRR by, a year or two after launch, I think we would have ejected pretty quick and switched to something else.
What were the problems there then? Because you say 1 year to 30, 40K. People are listening. That's great, Justin. That seems super fast. That's perfect. So what was going wrong there?
Well,
how did you fix it?
We started working on it in January 2018. So it was 8 months before we launched. And so we were funding all of that. And then after launch, we waited another, I think I came on full-time in April, and then John came on in August. So it was more months of work with no pay. And so by the time John came on, it had been, a year and a half of working with no pay, right? So it's just, you can't do that forever. And but once it was running, it immediately started to feel calm. There's this great interview that Cortland Allen did with me on the Indie Hackers podcast, like shortly after I'd gone full time. And he's like, dude, you are so relaxed right now. Like compared to our last conversation, you were high strung. You're like really launch focused and you were making it work, but it was clearly like you're like cranking this engine all the time. And he's like, dude, you have just chilled out. And it was because this transistor engine was working. And every month it was like, we did 5,000 last month, and this month we're doing 7. We did 7,000 last month, and this month we're doing 10. We're doing 10,000. It was just like this nice cumulative compounding of our efforts. And then it just kept working in a way that was really, really calm.
How did you make that happen?
Part of it was being deliberate in choosing a market that had a certain momentum, a certain amount of demand. So, podcasts, when we started Transistor, there was about 400,000, 500,000 podcasts. Now we're up to about 5 million. So the market in terms of people starting podcasts has increased quite a bit. And I could just see there was momentum. I personally knew people that were starting podcasts, searching for podcast hosting, purchasing podcast hosting. And then I talked to people in the hosting market, like Jason Cohen at WP Engine. I talked to Ruben Gamez. I talked to all these people in SaaS, and they're like, podcast hosting is really like website hosting, but 10 years ago. So you can almost look at the trajectory that happened with web hosting and then WordPress hosting 10, 15 years ago. And those dynamics are now at play in the podcast hosting market. It's not as big of a market. The market for just web hosting is way bigger, but it had a lot of the kind of similar dynamics. And this is kind of my point, is that the market you choose to pursue, the product you choose to build for that market, and then all of your built up advantages and everything, that determines way more than me doing anything. It's like, so how did you do that? How did you get Transistor from $0 MRR to, enough to go full time? And it's like, well, most of what we did is we chose a good market and a good market at that time.
But you were saying that first year, you chose a market, you're in podcasting. First year was stressful, challenging, not paying yourself that much.
Yeah.
But then after a year, things got a lot calmer.
Yeah.
Market's the same, or was it? Was there something that changed in the market?
Market's the same, but it does take some time to get any engine going. So, there's very few engines that you crank at once and then it's just like going. They do exist, like Balsamic. Peldy tells this story about starting Balsamic Mockups, and it was like he launched it, and it was like, he said it was like holding onto a rocket ship by his fingernails. It was just like explosive growth. Adam Wathan has experienced this with Tailwind UI as well. That's not as common, to have that. Normally you have to crank the engine a few times to get it to run. And I think what I'm warning people is, like, if you spent 3 years trying to crank this engine, there's something going on. In our case, we'd crank it, and it just kept getting easier to crank that engine until then it felt like we're just cruising. Right now, we're not having to put as much effort into this thing. It's going to take some work at the beginning, but I think most of any entrepreneurial success has to do with the market. It's the market you choose. And when I say market, I mean, how many people are out there in the world searching for this right now? How many people are out in the world buying this right now, or something similar? How much pent-up demand or how much latent demand is there for this thing? And every day people wake up and search for WordPress hosting. Every day people wake up and search for calendar scheduling software. Every day people wake up and search for podcast hosting. And so these have existing momentum, existing buyer intent, people out there searching for these things and buying these things. And all we had to do was capture some of that demand.
I'm just thinking, I wonder what Lemon Squeezy is, what market they're operating in. It's payments, right?
Yeah, I would say payments, and they benefit from all these other things, which is every day people wake up and are looking for a Gumroad alternative. There's existing momentum in that market, which could be called payment processing, payment links, billing software management. Their competitors are everything from Recurly to, they even do analytics. So their competitors are also ChartMogul, and there's all sorts of reasons people might use that. Some people are looking for merchant of record. Their nice thing is that people are searching for that stuff all the time. Actually, if we went into, this is a little trick, is that if you have a Ahrefs subscription, you can go in and look at what people are searching for. And so if we went into Ahrefs and we search for lemon squeezy, what are the top organic keywords that people are searching to find it? Let's see here. Let me share my screen. So, when we look at the screen, I see merchant of record searches. I see, where was the other one? PayPal subscription management, Stripe alternative. So there's online storefront. So there are people searching for these things all the time. Now, a lot of these, they're getting a lot of, digital products isn't one. Seller of record, another keyword. PayPal merchant of record. So that's what I'm talking about. You've got built-in intent there, and they're lucky because they've got all of these different entry points, right? Some people need a merchant of record. Some people need an online storefront. Some people need a Stripe alternative. There's all sorts of things, and each of those searches has a backstory. Like, some people need a Stripe alternative because Stripe doesn't work in their country. So they wake up one day and they're like, oh, I can't use Stripe. What's my alternative, right?
Mm-hmm. Justin, I want to move on to something that we didn't quite touch upon last episode.
Yeah.
That you put on in the end of your 2023 review. So at the end of your 2023 review, you spoke about how you were thinking of experiment with the family business, where you work with your kids to do various projects. 3 types of projects: creative work for the business, video editing, thumbnail creation, copy editing. 2, creative projects they were interested in exploring, making a video game, animation projects, coding projects. 3, admin work. This is funny. Bookkeeping, software upgrades, server maintenance, answering email. How has that gone this year? Have you sort of implemented more of that?
It's been good. I think it's been a good experiment. It was more, so a lot of that happened in the summer when the kids were off school.
Yeah.
So I have 4 kids aged 14 to 21. So my daughter is in college, and then my second oldest has recently graduated from high school, and then I've got 2 boys in high school. Sorry, just to be clear, Transistor is a separate business, and then I have my own corporation in Canada. That's where all this family business stuff is happening.
Yeah.
So I'm employing them with this corporation I have in Canada, and in Canada you can start hiring your kids, I believe, at 14. And
oh, cool.
I just pay them as regular salaried or hourly employees. They get all the payroll deductions and taxes and all that stuff done. And yeah, that's how I've organized it. And I think it worked well during the summer because they had time and they wanted to make money. And I love work. So I'm at work a lot. I'm thinking about work a lot. And I've never been a big sports guy. In terms of me being able to share my life with my kids, one channel is to involve them with work. So it worked great with the boys during the summer. They did projects for me. Video editing is a great project for a kid because you're just like cutting clips. It's pretty easy, straightforward. You can teach them a few the ripple delete in ScreenFlow, how to normalize the audio. You can teach them like 3 or 4 things, and then they can go through, and it's just kind of straight ahead work. So they edited quite a few videos for me. And then I would also just try to involve them in things that, they might still not have the expertise yet, but just to have them read one of my blog post drafts and give their opinion on it, for me to I did a lot of pairing. So where I would screen share with them, or I would have them come to my office and I would say, okay, right now I'm just going to go through and categorize all my transactions in the bookkeeping software. And then you let them watch you for a bit, and then you say, there's 100 more transactions. Do you think you could do this? And then just leave them and let them do it. So I found that stuff very helpful. And then for my daughter, who's at university, she's 5-hour drive from where I'm at, I ended up saying, hey, why don't you be kind of like my administrative assistant while you're in school? And I think that's worked out really well. We have a call every week where we spend about 2 to 3 hours screen sharing. And a lot of it is me giving her insights into the business. So just teaching her, here's how a business runs. So having a call with my daughter every week has just been such a joy, because, normally your kid goes off to college and it's like, you might not hear from them for a few weeks. So now we get this regular call every week to catch up. And then we get to work side by side in kind of a pair programming way where I'm sharing my screen and we're working through different problems together. One of my favorite things that she does, she'll get me to go to my inbox and tell me to bring up any email I've been procrastinating on. And then she will watch me as I type out responses, or and having your 21-year-old coach you on, Dad, your tone is a little off there, or man, this person is being really rude, confirming sometimes things, helping me talk through my feelings, like, so why does this one upset you so much? Why are you so anxious about this? What's going on there? So sometimes she's like helping me, let some feelings out, and then I'll usually assign her tasks throughout the week. And again, it's just been a joy. Some of those tasks are like, we wanted to improve my newsletter and my blog and my YouTube content. And so I just started sending her blog posts and newsletters and tweets from people that were kind of killing it. Like all the young whippersnappers, Peter Levels and Aaron Francis. But I just sent my daughter tons of these articles and things, and she would read them and then come back with these notes on why she thought they were successful from her point of view. And then we tried to strategize on how we could incorporate it into some of my content. So the Calm Companies post, for example, opens up with a story about just how depressing it's been to see so many of my friends get fired in this last year in the tech industry, and to observe kind of what's been driving that, all of this like frothy venture capital investment. And when the cash is sloshing around, all these companies hire all these people and then often don't even have much for them to do. And then, as soon as the economy goes bad, they all get laid off. And she was the one that kind of encouraged me to open up my posts whenever I can with a personal story. So yeah, that's kind of how it's gone. And like any experiment, there's been good and bad, like my middle son just got tired of having this job that's not a real job, and just went and got he's working at Dairy Queen now during his school year. So, it's worked in some ways, it's worked in other ways. I can't always be on in that moment. I'm a busy guy. I can't always be finding things for them to do. But I think the other thing that we've done well is to have meetings. We have a family retreat. We do a family business Christmas party, and we have meetings at those times. So we go around a big table, and my wife and I are really transparent about the finances. This is how it works. And to say, we're allocating some money here to make some new bets. And some of these are long-term bets. Like my oldest son is really into indie games. And I'm curious about that industry. I think it's cool. We did a project together where we made this little mini game that I think if you go to megamaker.ca, I think it's still up. And we built and launched that together. And then I said, well, if you're interested in pursuing this, why don't I fund the development of an indie game that we will release on Steam? I'll be the publisher. And if it does well, the family business gets some profits. If not, it's research and development, it's iteration, it's, working on some long-term bets that we might not normally get to do. And so we've also invested in, teaching them things, buying them books, buying them courses, getting them, subscriptions to some of these online course marketplaces, and I want to learn Adobe. Okay, well, let's do that. And then you'll have that skill set for the family business. And now you can do all sorts of other stuff. Let's teach you some animation, and then I'll use your animations on my YouTube channel. So it's been fun. It's been fun to work alongside the kids, to empower them to sometimes invest in this family business entity. And it might take a few years for these investments to pay off, but I have this feeling like making these investments now, teaching them skills that they actually get to apply on a real thing, is going to pay dividends for the family business, which eventually they'll inherit, and then also for them in their careers and everything else.
Justin, I'm going to wrap up on one final question, and it's probably not a short one. But you say you're investing in the family business, put a bit of money here, a bit of money there. Transistor has had a level of success where you have money to invest in certain things. Mm-hmm. Where do you choose to sort of invest your money now and in the future? Is it indie businesses? Is it just regular stocks and shares?
Yeah, I've just... So the past couple of years, I've had enough, and it's not a lot still, but I've had enough kind of capital build up that I could set some aside for some investments. And so just this year, I've started writing some smaller checks. I'm involved as an advisor and shareholder with a new startup called RevGems, and I've been working with them this year. I just wrote a pretty big check for me in a local startup here that I really like the founder, and I think it could go to zero, but it's like a reasonable bet. And so my goal now, I'm 43, is to start making some more bets. I also put in place, as soon as there was enough cash flow coming in, I put in, I'm way behind when it comes to retirement saving and all that kind of stuff. And so I started being pretty aggressive in putting big chunks of money away every month that just get whisked out of my account that I don't even see, that go into some sort of robo-investor thing. And, that's kind of going, and that'll grow at, whatever is 5 to 10% a year, hopefully. And then, I've also set aside some money for making these bets. And I think thinking in bets is a good approach for entrepreneurs, especially, once you have a financial engine that's working. It's good to do both, to just automatically start funneling money out every month. That's just, you don't see it. It's just, whatever. If you start with $100 or 1,000 or 10,000, every month that money just gets whisked out of your account and put in a fund somewhere. I highly recommend you do that. And that's I think I shared this story before, but when my snowboard shop went belly up, I ended up liquidating all of my retirement savings to get us out of debt. And wow. I was so heartbroken after that happened. I'd been saving. I'd started saving for retirement when I was 14. And so to have to liquidate all of that, I just got kind of bitter and resentful. But then that meant that I didn't get back on the horse and start putting money away again. And in retrospect, I should have just started putting $10 away every month again, and 100 and 1,000 and whatever. So I highly recommend that you just get that going, whatever state you're in, just go. And I have a Wealth Simple account, and that just does it. You can do it all sorts of different ways. But then, and once you have a financial engine that works, I think it's time to start making some bets. The best bets you can ever make is not in the stock market. It's partnering, investing in companies that are pretty early stage. And, a bootstrapper might need 5, 20, 30, 50, 100 grand. And, might take a couple angel checks from a few people. And I think, once you've got some money to kind of play with, that you're okay with going to zero, starting to make those bets of just writing a few checks every year is kind of the approach I'm taking. This is not investment advice. This is for informational and entertainment purposes only.
This is Edison James one final time. JR also gave his thoughts on how he approaches investing. Here's what he had to say.
I have done some angel stuff. I've written checks. I've been burned a few times, more times than I've been like positive. There was like one positive one that was pretty decent, and I actually got my money back plus a lot more. I think long-term plan though, what I would love, and I've talked about this like in other podcasts, but eventually it'd be really, really cool to have Make Lemonade have an arm that's literally called Lemonade, like lemon and then AID. So Lemonade. And it is like my take on investing for these types of businesses. So it's different than traditional institutionalized funding. I think we'd still have like a decent sized fund, but the approach we take would be a little bit different. And so long term, that's what I'd like to do. I don't know if that will ever come to light. I read a lot that like, it's for me, I don't know if I would get the joy out of it. Like give someone a check and then hopefully we hear back in the next 5 years or 7 years what happened, or, so it's like I miss out on being involved. But then that's like what makes, if you have an investor that's super involved in your business, then you're kind of a shitty investor. So that's what I'm saying. I feel like it needs to be different, where it's almost like I can only take on so many, but I have a way of being involved to help make sure that my real skill set of like building companies and distribution and marketing and how to scale and those things get brought out through the investing instead of just money. So I don't know. That's a tough one, but that's like how I would think about it.
Well, Justin, thank you so much for coming on and sharing more of your thoughts on the Lemon Squeezy podcast.
Yeah.
Wish you all the best for the next few months and years of Transistor.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Okay, all right.